Good afternoon. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Dr. Foley, roll call, please.
President Kaler, members of the board, let the record show that 4 members are present and 1 member is joining us telephonically. Ms. Schultz is via Teams.
Very good. Thank you so much. We are going to have a moment of silence followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. All right, we're going to move on. Do you hear that echo? Anybody else? I hear it. Okay, there's a little bit of feedback, but we'll go on. I move that we approve the agenda.
Second.
Any questions or concerns? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion carries 4-0. 5-0. Sorry, I heard you, Mrs. Schultz, from a closet. Okay, we are going to move on to our public hearing. At this time, the meeting will recess for the purpose of holding a public hearing on the proposed expenditure budget for the 2022-2023 school year in accordance with ARS 15-905.01DE. Members of the audience are invited to make comments and ask questions during the public hearing. Thank you, Mr. Moore.
Good afternoon, President Kaler, Vice President Anderson, members of the board. Today we have the 2023 proposed budget and its official preliminary forms as our state is continuing to work through the state budget. You'll see throughout this presentation we've made various assumptions on what that state budget will look like, but by statute we are still held to our standards and our deadlines to both propose and adopt a budget for next fiscal year. So you'll see our lovely budget timeline. We have completely gone through the full budget timeline, and now you're looking at an updated graphic for fiscal year 22-23. So all the way back to the left, we are in June 2022. Today we'll be presenting the proposed 23 budget, and then in the preceding governing board meeting on June 22nd, we'll be presenting the adopted. These include several of the increases that we've talked through through this whole fiscal year and what was tentatively approved in March. Moving forward, pending no changes and or approved state budget by the governor, we'll present the same budget on June 22nd as it mentioned. If necessary, again, in December, the district has an option to revise its budget. And that is if we over budget it and we need to revise down. As you know, we are very conservative in our budget numbers, and in this year, we did not have to revise down. We could have revised up, but we chose not to. And so several of those same assumptions is what you're gonna see here tonight, or this afternoon, excuse me. Then in May, like we just went through last month, the district will legally revise the 2023 budget as required by state statute. Again, the governing board will have had 5 months as we will plan on being in front of the board early next calendar year to talk about, again, everything that we've talked about this year. Proposals, assumptions, compensation increases for 2024. And then we started the process over again. So there's the full budget cycle as a reminder. So getting into the 2023 budget highlights, due in part to the state not having any sort of budget passed at this point, we are still assuming the same budget highlights that you've seen throughout this year. So one, no additional COVID relief. those bills have, and propositions from the federal government have all but stopped. And so we are now finishing up spending down what we have remaining. We do have budgeted in fiscal '23 the second $1,500 retention stipend, which will be expended in September for those employees who come back to us next year and work those first couple months. Second, even though in every single budget bill that's being proposed, the AEL limit is being exempted for '23, there still has been no official budget. So we are, I'm still assuming, because nothing has been, no pen has hit the paper, that we would face this potential cut again, as it is right now. So we are planning on holding a larger contingency for this, just in case those bills do not go through. We will be prepared.
Mr. Moore, our governor has said that, or the legislator at one point had said when they passed the aggregate spending limit last year that we shouldn't expect it for the following year. Is that correct?
Say that one more time. We should not.
That we should not expect that they would pass an exemption for it for the following years. Yes.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I just want to make sure the public's aware. I think it would be a good thing for the public to hear that they have said that they won't keep passing it for us. So that you should write your legislator and let them know that we would like it passed again so we can use the money. That's all I'm asking. Thank you.
Moving down the list, we did have the ASR contribution rates come down slightly. That is going to be a small budget savings. Bullet point 4, we are still transferring $4.4 million from Mno to capital to pay for the school lease payment. In addition, due to the additional budget capacity being proposed this afternoon, we are transferring an additional 3.6 for capital contingency. This is due in part to help provide some contingency pending our bond for 2022 does not pass. Again, if that does not pass, we will be right in the middle of, depending on where we are with ADM, we may need capital at a moment's notice. So rather than bringing a revised budget, we would have that budget contingency available and be able to make any sort of capital purchases at a moment's notice. We would look to revise this if the bond, the 2022 bond does pass. We would bring this 3.6 back to Mno in the May revision. So, and then lastly, Higley Unified is moving to a self-insurance plan for fiscal year '23. We project the estimated budget savings to be over $500,000. And as we finalize our numbers, we are realizing an even greater estimated savings. Remember though, under self-insured, the district is responsible for claims incurred next year, so we don't know what those claims are going to be. But on paper, it does look, again, like we are making the best move for our district, both budgetarily, and then we hope to use those savings again to put, not to sit in a district's bank account, but to use those next fiscal years to enhance our medical plans and give those back to our employees.
Mr. Moore, and just in looking at this, most of our medical claims, good word, are pregnancies. We have a very healthy district overall, so hopefully that will continue.
Yeah, I think preliminary, working with Ms. Martins and the benefits team, we're looking at potentially having a claims percentage for this year at 79%. And again, so we are not self-insured, so we pay, even though we have claims at 79%, we pay 100% of those. And so that's, 21% of our budget that we're giving to United Healthcare for coverage. So that's part of the reason why we're going this direction, just because we've had experience low claims and continuously over the past couple of years. So. And just to note, while this change does not change the employee medical contributions, it did change a few voluntary coverages that Ms. Martins and her team have been working hard on communicating out to employees, sites, departments, and et cetera. So we are still working through communicating that out, especially with the rollover in out-of-pocket premium expenses. So those are still continuously being communicated out and working with employees. All right, let's get to the budget. The fiscal year 2023 proposed budget, we'll start up top. So this 21-22 general revised budget is what we just revised in May. it was noted that I was less than a 1% off, but that was a total, we still incurred a total revised budget of 2.7 million in increases. A lot of that, again, was based on ADM increases that we budgeted flat, but we experienced growth. Looking at the 2023 proposed budget, we're showing a major increase in general budget limit compared to the estimated numbers that I used tentatively in our approved budget back in March. The difference is an increase of 4.1 million to 116.9 million, up from the estimated 112.7 million that I presented in March. This increase can be attributed to several things. So first, we are projecting, again, no ADM increase for fiscal 23. And the budget forms is consistent with our budget practice in just another area where we're taking a conservative approach. However, as you know, we are experiencing growth throughout our district, so we are still staffing for that growth. And you noticed a lot of that in our fixed cost increases that were absorbed in our estimated or tentatively approved budget back in March. Second, we are keeping the 2% inflation as knowing that is the minimum which the state has to fund us, considering the state realized in 2021 7% increase in inflation. But by statute, we are capped at 2%, so we know that is a given. Third, this is where I'm taking some assumptions in what is being proposed and what is being talked about with our legislators, as well as working with our policy groups and what they're advocating for K-12 education. We are assuming that, not assuming, in every single bill that's being proposed right now, we are seeing approximately 100 million towards a Group B sped weight. That is a consistent. And so I am capturing that in this new estimate. We are also seeing anywhere from 400 to 600 million in additional K-12 increases due to the large budget that the state is sitting on in terms of surplus, and as well as realized Arizona is kind of an anomaly, right? We are experiencing growth outside of the national realm. And so the state did not project that. So they are experiencing some increases in budgets across the board. And so in any given bill that's being proposed, K-12 is seeing an increase from anywhere from 400 to 600 million and proposed increases to the base level support. I'm taking a way conservative approach in projecting 200 million, and that would equate to approximately 3% increase to the base. So while this is up 4 million from my March proposal, this could potentially be up another 4 million when all said and done with the state budget. So yes, an increase, but a conservative increase to not inflate our budget and not have us revise down. I do not feel we'll be revising this down. I feel, if anything, we'll be revising this up going forward. So moving down the list, we are still assuming the Mno Transfer of 4.4 million with the additional 3.6 for capital contingency. This also takes into consideration the ASRS reduction, and then it also assumes that we will still carry over 22 million in budget balance carry forward, which is approximately 19% of the total budget. So safety nets all across the board, as well as our ability to still provide compensation increases for our employees and move forward with staffing our schools for the additional increases that we are expecting for next fiscal year. In summary, looking at the bottom formula, you can see now that we're experiencing 7.4 million in additional budget capacity from our revised to our proposed. And then adding in the 2.7 in additional budget capacity that we revised from May, you'll see a total of 10.1 million in additional budget for fiscal 23. So, as a reminder, the board approved the 7% compensation increase to all employees back in March, which was an estimated 4.7 million, with the additional 1.2 million in fixed costs that we feel that we're going to realize next fiscal year. That totaled 6 million, so you can, in new budget expenditures, so taking the 6 off the 10, you can see we're presenting approximately an additional 4 million tonight in this proposal. Any questions on this? There's a lot of moving parts. But again, I hope that the board and our community feels safe in this budget proposal, that we are not inflating our numbers, more or less taking a conservative approach to next year, and hopes to continue to provide compensation increases for years prior, but also provide our schools with the necessary supplies and capital needs they need for next fiscal year.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Moore. And again, to reiterate that we have to submit this regardless of what's happening at the state level. So I can understand this flux and being on the conservative side, not knowing exactly what they're going to do. Frustrating, but nonetheless, it is what it is.
Across the board, though, good news for Higley and what we can do for the future. I feel very confident that we can make a lot of our initiatives funded. And it's nice to see the state start to invest some budget into K-12 in addition to their regular obligated statutory inflation percentage. So that is encouraging news. Second, in the proposed budget is also a chance where the district updates the average teacher salary calculations. And so if you recall, the Higley formula took into consideration a number of things that we did not consider appropriate when calculating average teacher salary. Those included various supplementals that were not offered to all teachers, such as leadership, longevity, mentoring, tutoring, and summer school, to name a few. So discussing with Cabinet, we felt this year provided an opportunity to reset the calculation so we can reflect an accurate number, one that is realistic of an average teacher salary in Higley Unified. The calculation now considers only two sources, one being base pay and the other being classroom site fund. You'll note the upcoming classroom site fund calculation for this fiscal year 23 is $7,000. Of that, $3,500 is in the base pay for teachers, and the other $3,500 is going to be in a performance pay plan that the Meet and Confer team and HR will bring to the board once it's approved by the Teacher Association in August. So you'll see that detailed plan on that second $3,500 and how that's earned in this upcoming months. So reading the calculation, you'll see our projected teacher salary for fiscal 23 is $65,717. So that takes into consideration, we have some experienced teachers and we have some new teachers. That's all Higley's average, plus the 7% increase that we provided in March. That is an increase of approximately $3,500 and $35.44 from the prior year. And the percentage increase, as you'll see, is asterisk because it's showing 6% because of that calculation reset that we are proposing today. So we feel this is a better accurate reflection. If somebody were to go on our website and look, as you know, this by statute, a couple years ago, this came about. This needs to be posted on our website. And so we just hope, we'll include that asterisk, but we just hope we are not, while we did do the 7%, that percentage increase is not, is because of this calculation reset and not a faction of us not giving the 7% in reality. So I just want to make that clear. Any questions on the average teacher salary calculation? Okay. So with that, tonight, or this afternoon, this is the proposed budget that we're proposing. This will be public on our website for the next couple of weeks. It will also be posted by statute in our local paper. So if you do not have internet access, you can find it in the paper. And then we will bring it for adoption on June 22nd for the board to formally adopt our budget for fiscal 23.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Any questions, comments? Anybody from the public? Anyone? All righty. Then I move that we reconvene in open session.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Did we hear Tiffany? Do we hear Tiffany? Mrs. Schultz? I'm going to say this passes 4-0.
Sorry,
Oh, there she is.
I forgot to unmute myself, but I abstained.
Okay, 5-0. Motion carries. Okay, thank you again, Mr. Moore. We're going to move on to our superintendent report.
President Kaler, members of the board, we are just recently off of the May whirlwind of events, celebrations, and multiple opportunities to celebrate the amazing students and employees in this district. And as we transition into summer, we are in full swing getting ready for next year. The administrative staff is excited about the next school year. We have some important upcoming events. Obviously, we have several meetings this summer as we keep you informed of important progress on work that is being done and as we prepare for the beginning of school. And we're excited because we will restart this year with a rally. While we have officially outgrown HCPA for a single rally, we will be scheduling 2 in order to welcome people back in person this year as we prepare for our first day of school, July 25th. So right now it is all hands on deck as we just finish one year and begin working toward the next.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Foley. I remember getting the first calendar invite from Mrs. Reach for back to school when we weren't even out of school yet. So the summer goes by fast here. All right, board comments. Mrs. Wilson.
I just want to thank everyone. I went to a numerous amount of events in the last 2 weeks of school. I'm not going to name them all. You knew if I was there or not. That's enough. But I want to thank the custodians especially because I was at an event late in the evening and they came in and helped clean up and were just so kind and helped us all. And their jobs are extra special during these times when we're super busy, and our admin and our teachers and our staff and the volunteers who all came in to make these events happen. I just want to thank them all because all the events were fantastic, and an extra special shout out to the HTAP graduation because it was really special, as well as the other 2 graduations we had.
Anyone else? Yes. Fabulous end of the year celebrations, and I know that the schools were all excited to have so many things back in play for the end of the year, and so it was nonstop those last few weeks of school. And I appreciate the board for attending anything and everything they can amongst their own busy schedules. So it was a lot. So thank you. Okay. Sorry, don't know what happened. The clown nose fell off the microphone. We are going to move on to, there's no public comments. So we're going to move on to consent. I move that we approve consent agenda items 8.1 to 8.22.
Second.
Comments, questions, concerns? I want to point out just a couple things. One, a gift donation by Mrs. Shannon Bodner for the amount of $2,000. We want to thank her. And again, I know the PTOs donated quite a bit of cash dollars as well to Coronado and Power Ranch for some items. So again, very generous community that we live in, and we're very grateful. I'm also excited on 8.15 if thank you, Curtis, for pulling that up. That the JMF Higley Foundation has agreed to help us with our funding for the roof replacement and capital repairs at Sossaman. So grateful for that. Thank you for the work. I'm sure it was Mr. Moore working behind the scenes nonstop on this, so we appreciate that very much. Anything else? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion carries 5-0. We are going to move on to some, oh, we have an announcement to make.
President Kaler, members of the board, with your approval of consent, you have just officially confirmed the next principal of Williamsfield High School, Mr. Dan Fox, who's in the audience.
It's like you never left. You really did it, so thank you so much. We're excited for you and for the Williamsfield family, and we thank you for your dedication and time to Higley very much, so appreciate you.
President Kaler?
Yes.
I was able to go to the forum, and I want to thank Dr. Foley and her whole team, especially these two ladies over here, for putting on such a great forum for the parents and the staff and making it just a great question and answer. So we got to hear a little more about both candidates. So thank you.
Yes, and for the community to know that we are already working to hire a very confident principal for Sossaman, and that work is already happening, and we are excited for what's to come there as well. So just know that we are working hard. So, okay, thank you. Now we're going to go on to 9.1 and our student code of conduct information item.
President Kaler, Vice President Anderson, members of the board. Today we have an opportunity to come back and talk to you about the work that we, can you hear me? You know, I think that we need to perhaps have something that we can rise the microphone on, but I'll squat down today. We'll do good. Oh. Thank you. I appreciate a microphone and a captive audience. So we have an opportunity today to come back and talk to you about some work that Mr. Walker and a committee did in looking at our code of conduct over the last few months. So when we came in February, we talked about a plan that we put in place to review the code of conduct. And so that's what's happening, and you're going to see the results of that today. The last time the code of conduct was discussed or brought to a board meeting was 2017, so it had been a while. And so while there had been changes that had made throughout the time, they hadn't been formally discussed and talked about with you. And I think what's important when we talk about the code of conduct is really that it's a regulation that is defined by policy, that how we look at discipline and consequences and define those things. And so within the code of conduct and listed for us, you'll see different policies. Policy JIC outlines student discipline. But remember that the code of conduct is what supports the policies. The policies are listed. And so when you look at changes and different things like that, there was no changes to policy that was made. What was changes to is how that we are looking at providing a consistent and method for a discipline matrix and definitions of the different infractions that occur and what our responses to those will be. You know, examples and questions that have been asked previously, like when you look at dress code or something like that. Dress code is defined by policy JICA and our regulation JICA-R, not by the code of conduct. But the code of conduct addresses then what consequences and infractions can happen based upon the dress code. And so I think it's an important distinction to understand that the code of conduct is not necessarily policy, it's just supporting the policies that have already been put in place by the governing board. And so when we take a look at some of the changes that need to be made, they will be addressed through our policy process and through looking at that throughout the whole school year instead of just turning around and changing what's happening within the code of conduct. But I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Walker, who did an outstanding job, and I want to give him credit for the work that he and his committee did about putting a formal process in place to review the code of conduct and to bring back some examples and different things about how they have made changes in order to allow for consistency and communication within the code of conduct for not just our community, but for our employees as well.
Thank you. President Kaler, Vice President Anderson, good afternoon. As we move forward through the presentation, I want to outline the process that we use to review the code of conduct. So we began with an elaborate three-prong approach to review our existing code of conduct. The prongs consisted of an internal review with our code of conduct committee. We did an external content comparison with our neighboring peer districts, our K-12 districts that surround us. And then we had a legal examination to review the existing document as well. So our Code of Conduct Committee, I just want to take this moment to publicly thank everybody for the work and discussion. It was very productive, and that consisted of myself and then Ms. Dina Morgan, Assistant Director of Counseling Services, Brian Campbell, our Student Information Systems Manager, Mr. Todd Berg, the Bridges Elementary Assistant Principal, Ms. Lindsay Reeves, Santan Elementary Assistant Principal, Ms. Andrea Zabo, Gateway Point Elementary Assistant Principal, and then Mr. Brandenburg, Cooley Middle School Dean of Students, Mr. Potts, Ossaman Middle School Dean of Students, and then Ms. Pamela Simmons from Higley High School Dean of Students, and Ms. Elner, Williamsfield High School Dean of Students. Oh, I'm sorry, yeah, and Terry Pepper, Assistant Principal from Chaparral Elementary. So prong number one of our review is the internal review. So we pulled together a Code of Conduct Committee with representation from all of our grade levels across the district, and we were conscientious of including equal representation from all of the feeder systems within the school district. The committee followed a process. We modeled it after what we use for the course guide review process and utilized a formal change request process. So we used forms to request change based on changes to just general information within the Code of Conduct, and in addition to that, a form to request any changes to the discipline matrix. And our committee spent over 10 hours together. We conducted a thorough review of what we have currently in existence. We did a data dive to look at a 5-year analysis of number of infractions and type of infractions that were issued and the consequences that were aligned with those, and then discussion about best practice and best use of the Code of Conduct. The peer district comparison, our committee reviewed content from our neighboring school districts. We utilized Chandler's, Gilbert's, Mesa Public Schools, and Queen Creek Unified School District. We reviewed the layout, the violations, the descriptions, the consequences, the formatting, the language that was used within, and the process was the committee had a month to review the peer districts and then follow back up, and we convened to discuss findings. And in our legal review process, we used Ms. Denise Lowe-Britt from Udall-Shumway, where she took a comprehensive look into our current document, looked for changes in policy, changes in federal and state statute, and then she reviewed format and language of the document and to ensure clarity and appropriate legal language of the document. So our findings. The committee found that our current Code of Conduct was considered relevant and appropriate for our school district. But one of the findings that we did, the consensus was that our Code of Conduct is essentially a disciplinary matrix, but it's being utilized as a district handbook. And what we found is there's a difference, and that was a big thing that came out from our peer reviews, is our neighboring districts have a Code of Conduct, but it's embedded within their handbooks. And we really have kind of a handbook embedded within our Code of Conduct. And so the discussion led to the point that it's not necessarily a useful tool in the sense of information. It's rather outlining what happens when you do violate one of the rules, rather than explaining maybe how the rules come to be and how to best navigate the expectations of the school district. There's consistency in the application rather than the matrix was the desired outcome from the committee. So with that, in other words, the infractions and the types of disciplinary language used in the Code of Conduct didn't necessarily equal a consistent practice across our district. So what the committee preferred was a best use of the existing information and how to be more consistent with the Code of Conduct. And then there was some legal changes that just needed to be aligned with recent legislative changes. Two in particular, there was updates to the hazing law, and in our kindergarten through 4th grade out-of-school suspension expectation. So committee discussion led to suggestions to utilize the document to align better with the infractions. So we would like to convene more frequently to discuss how to use the document across the district to be more consistent. And so what is defined in the conduct document is utilized accordingly. So it's one of the requests from the committee was to get together more often and to discuss the sequence, how to best use progressively and what infractions equals which definition within the violations within the document. There were legal updates required that needed to be assigned to align with the changes. There was some grammatical and formatting updates necessary. And then, again, the biggest finding is we use the Code of Conduct as a handbook, when we should really have a district handbook as a reference tool. And then within that would be the disciplinary matrix, which is commonly referred to in our district as the Code of Conduct. That would best provide specific information for our community, for our students, and our parents within the district. So our next steps moving forward, we've already updated the document with the legal and committee recommendations. We aim to publish the Code of Conduct by July 1st, so it's available for the upcoming school year, and then move forward to conduct training for best use and consistency. But then the biggest next step that we're looking forward to is convening a committee to really dig in and prepare a a handbook that outlines portions of the Code of Conduct within, but in addition to that, more of a better use K-12 handbook for the 23-24 school year. So we'll bring back to you next year the handbook to present for the upcoming school year and the year to follow.
President Kaler, members of the board, I wanted to just add a component here. One of the powerful pieces that he talked about was the work that he did with his committee. You have the individuals here who are, if you will, the experts of discipline on a campus. When they're taking a deep dive at our own data, taking a look at our patterns, our trends, how are we using this? How are we being consistent? What additional resources do we have? How do we approach this better consistently? That's an important process that transcends in value beyond just the work that's on paper. And I want to commend the amount of time that this team and committee put together, because the conversations that James would bring back to David and I about what we were doing and how we were doing it and what we need to do differently is powerful. And it's important. And you will see is going to be reflected in additional work that needs to be done this year as a priority when we look at the work toward accomplishing goals in our strategic plan.
Any questions for anybody?
Hi, yes, I have a question.
Sure.
Thank you for working on this and putting this together and making it more manageable and useful. My question goes to your training for best use and consistency across the district. So I'm assuming this is staff related, correct? What you're talking about, the training?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you just, I don't know if you put it together or if you have some ideas floating in your head of what that will look like. Of course, we all know that first week back, it's like drinking out of a fire hose, correct? So we want it, as teachers want it and need to use it, but sometimes it's such a large document with so much information. Like, how do we make sure that it's something that's perceived as relevant, very useful, referred back to, and then how can teachers relay that information to students? Like, are we gonna have posters, or are they gonna incorporate it in their first weeks back? Have the students interact with that information so it's not confusing to them, the expectations are understood, and then parents are also on board so that they know, instead of getting that phone call and questioning why was my son's, a friend told me why his son's cell phone was put up at the front desk, whereas sometimes It's not consistent.
Well, the first part I'll address. I think when we talk about training and best practices and things, and when we're looking for this idea of consistency of application of it across district, and so that training in different things is what's going to happen with our administration in terms of making sure that we understand what changes have been made within that in terms of definitions. Because what we're finding out is that at some places they defined an act in different ways. Our goal by getting all of the people in the room was to go through and figure out what infractions, what would a situation and what infractions, to make sure that we have consistency there. So when we're talking about professional development and things, it's not necessarily for the teachers right now. We're talking about giving it to the administrators so that we can all get on the same page and have those discussions. We have our monthly administrator meetings where James has the opportunity every time, and we'll be doing professional development surrounding this throughout the year, because I think this is something that is just not a shot in the dark and then we move on, right? This is a continuing discussion and professional development throughout the year.
Yeah, and then to address some of the other points, so that's part of the discussion that came up is how this is being used and what is the familiarity with the document from both students and parents and teachers. And so that's part of the process, and that's where the handbook, I think, would become very beneficial, is that it's going to be more of a tool that's useful for the community, that they would use to be able to better understand the expectations rather than just go straight to the discipline. So it's going to be a work in progress to better communicate that, but one of the things that we are working on is a more uniform way that our administrators communicate to the teachers of what the best practices for classroom management procedures would be, and then also have more of a uniform structure for when the kids come back and how the key elements of the document are communicated to the students. This year was the first year that we've actually rolled out having the Code of Conduct acknowledgement online, which is the hope that it touches more people sooner rather than having to go and on their own find a document and then get the form. And now it's all in one spot and it's connected within Synergy as well too. Sure, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. I'm so happy to see this get brought to us. I've been in the district a long time, I feel like now, and I've looked at the Code of Conduct many times over, but it's nice to see that we're getting all of our administrators on the same page where there won't be discrepancies, I guess, in what we maybe laid out. I think it's really good because when our littles are going up to the next grade, they already know the expectation. When they're going to the next school, our elementary kids are going to our middle schools. They should have all been treated the same at elementary to go to our middle schools and then to feed into our high schools on expectations and consequences. Maybe a little different. I read through the whole thing, don't worry. I read every line. So consequences will be different at different grade levels, but the expectation's still the same, that we're following the policies that the governing board has set. So thank you so much. I know this was a lot of work because I read it all and it was a lot of work just to even read. So thank you.
You're welcome. And to address that point as well, that was one of my favorite parts of the discussion, was bringing in a K-12 team to work together to have those discussions, because rather in the past it had been separated. So when I was a high school administrator, we would meet as a secondary and just talk about secondary discipline. Now having K-12 in the room to discuss what this looks like and progressively speaking, it was very healthy and productive dialogue, and so I appreciate the insight to that. Thank you.
President Kaler, members of the board, going back to one of the first things they said, this is like a regulation that's kind of like a matrices to our policies. This also gives window into where are those additional policies we need to work on that need revision, updating, and alignment so that there's not inconsistencies. And this is one of those cross-check components, if you will, in a system that has accountability that shows where priorities are that we need to address. And this process kind of illuminated that. So I think the nice thing is you have a more updated matrices going into this year with a clear outline of an additional next steps of what we're going to be creating to make that even a more proactive part. And then as we update additional policies throughout this, we will be rolling this out in training like we've done on all other components. So again, a nice lockstep component of how one piece is connected to another so that our system moves forward and not contradictory, rather in tandem.
President Kaler. Dr. Foley, I sent this question in beforehand, so I know you know it's coming, but dress code will be something we address through board policy at some point.
President Kaler, Board Member Wilson, that was one of the components that one is actually one that's substantially old. I think we looked at it, is it 2001. So we have a policy that is even referencing the terminology of clothing that our students would look at us and say, what are you talking about? And so it does beg the question that may resolve and needing to be updated.
Thank you. I appreciate you guys looking at that. I know that's been a hot topic in our community and even within my own households at times. So I appreciate that you guys are going to bring that back before us to look at and possibly revise to be clear to parents on expectations and to students all across the board. Thank you.
President Kaler. I appreciate your taking the time and that we've been talking about this. We talked about this earlier today. The players, you brought in the deans, you brought in the assistant principals. They're the ones who handle the discipline on campuses. And I appreciate, excuse me, that you are working on the training and getting this information to them. We receive disciplinary reports every week, And in the past, there's been sometimes you see the same infraction, 2 different locations, and 2 different outcomes. And I know all of us have been like, what's going on here? Why are we, can you explain? And sometimes there's totally an explanation and it falls under a certain term, but the matter of the offense could be different. But I appreciate that you guys are working with all the administrators to get on the same page so that I know for you guys and for us as board members, if we hear stuff from the community, we see that consistency. And then it starts conversation, what do we need to change? Does this make sense? Instead of us, well, I think we're gonna just change this one or that one. So I love that you have that committee of the people who are the ones who handle it. And then you're gonna do the training so that we can be consistent. And from what I've seen from you, Mr. Walker, you're gonna be providing that support for them as well to ensure the consistency. So I just wanna let you know I appreciate having the people that are handling it in the room and helping making those decisions. So thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Reese. And one of the things we're going to continue is to keep the Code of Conduct Committee year in and year out. So as trends develop and things change, we'll continue to have this discussion. So the hope is that we come back every year and we inform you of what our discussions look like on an annual basis. And so that's the hope, is it just remains a consistent practice.
Will we be swapping out the elementary principals? Because I don't think all of them are on, the elementary assistant principals. Are they all on there, or will we be swapping them out? How does that look for your committee moving forward?
So the committee for next year is to be determined, but one of the things that we did is we have had ongoing dialogue. So outside of the committee, there's been discussion points ongoing throughout. So the hope is to include everybody's consensus and opinion in the process.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Yeah, we need to remove the word culottes or parachute pants, whatever. What was in 20 years ago that we were? That was probably 1970, so I'm, knickers. Okay, so anyways, thank you for addressing an old document. We appreciate that very much. And moving ahead, I'm just thinking ahead that, we have parents sign a code of conduct, but it might be when the handbook is created, it's a sign the handbook. It might be an acknowledgement of that online. I won't be here in 23, 24 year, but I would definitely encourage somehow that gets a signature. So that's my only input for that. But thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you, President Kaler. And that's part of the discussions. It's very early on in that stage, but the hope is that the Code of Conduct is a part of the handbook. So there'll maybe no longer be a Code of Conduct acknowledgement, but a handbook acknowledgement, and consisting of many pieces, including that of the discipline matrix would be embedded inside.
It seems in this district too, when we put that rise to the occasion students, this is the expectation, so many do hit that mark. So again, it's getting that information out to them and saying, like you say, early on in the elementary years of saying, this is our expectation and this follows you all of your days. So I think that'll be awesome. Thanks.
Sure thing. And the hope is that the Code of Conduct remains as a point, but the more pertinent information would be for our students especially to stay out of that chapter of the handbook,
Right.
and
Exactly.
the preceding information would help to guide that better. So,
Exactly. Yeah. Awesome. Good stuff. Appreciate
Thank
you,
you.
gentlemen. Okay, we are going on to 9.2 and our governing board initiatives and the progress made. And I believe this will be Dr. Foley.
President Kaler, members of the board, I'm sharing the next 2 agenda items are really important for us because one of our core values is accountability. And one of the things that the governing board has done a very good job of doing is, and historically has done, is outlined strategic initiatives that they wanted us to focus on this for the year. I will be sharing real quickly because we'll be talking about last year's work, and then our next agenda item will be talking about this coming year's work. And this is work that we did initially and that we started in April 10th in this room in 2021. And then we updated this together when we did our retreat a year later on April 9th. And one of the things that we had done together as a team was to identify, obviously there were a lot of priorities that needed to be accomplished. And as we worked with myself and the cabinet team to identify 4 core priority goals that we were going to work on this year. We then identified in those goals what are examples of the kind of work and artifacts that you could be expecting to receive from us and that we could keep you updated in various ways, from email to status to presentations to ongoing weekly or daily as needed communication. So I will review real quickly the 4 goals we identified, and then we'll talk about the progress we made. When you look at the slide, it looks like this. It looks like a file folder. That we left that presentation exactly as it was from when we did it over a year ago. So we had identified that for this year, our priority goal was to update and refine our strategic plan for the 2022 through the 2027 and to outline a roadmap for a portrait of a graduate. So we had talked about the fact that we would develop an outline, we would implement plans, we would organize and gather feedback, and that we would put together a portrait of a graduate as one of our goals. So this is just showing, the next slide is kind of a summary of progress that we made as a team toward that goal. As you know, strategic planning was a focus for us this entire year. And the next few slides, and again, we've shared this with you in our retreat, but as you can see, this was something that kind of summarizes over from identifying that this was a goal to SWOT analysis, to identifying core values, to working on feedback groups, to analyzing feedback analysis through multiple venues, coming up with updating those documents and resources. As you know, you've approved this at our meeting in May. So that here again, some of those artifacts that were created as part of our progress toward this goal. Okay. Goal number 2 was to continue to ensure the safety of our students and employees as they return to school in the 2020-2021 school year. Ironically, as we identified this goal, as often happens, one does not have a crystal ball. At the time that we created this goal, we really truly didn't know about the next wave of COVID. We had no idea about the variations that would come through our community. We had identified at the time, back in April, had we had a crystal ball, if only we'd had a crystal ball, we had talked about how we would work with the Department of Public Health, how we would work with our communications and our screening protocols, and how we would be very intentional toward social emotional well-being of our students and employees. Obviously knowing that this is always something that's been a priority, but obviously this was a greater need considering the reality that we were dealing with. You know, a year is a long time ago. I mean, the month of May alone felt like 100 years. When I look at examples of progress made, we identified a mitigation plan. We identified a progressive mitigation plan. We had to modify within that progressive mitigation plan because sites were not all the same. COVID cases rise, new variants came, guidance from the health department changed. I mean, when superintendents are on Zoom calls with the White House and CDC officials, you know the world is unique and requiring momentum and change. The health organization guidance on a monthly basis was shifting and changing. Needs changed for us. Obviously, we experienced things we could never possibly predicted, and yet we identified and kept consistent with our mitigation plan, our progressive mitigation plan, and our dashboard and courtesy notifications. And I think that, you know, very challenging time, we navigated through a very unique time that we could not have even predicted when we established this as a goal. Some of this was within our control and a lot of this was not. Obviously, we provided support to sites as needed with increasing cases. When December and January hit, we saw numbers unlike we'd never experienced yet in COVID. So again, a lot of progress was made this year as we navigated through this as a team. Also, one of the things we're really proud of is the tremendous progress we made towards social emotional support. You've heard through our work that we did with ESSER and our surveys and our priorities, the addition of additional counselors, the work that we're doing with bringing in resources. We've done a lot with outlining some priorities that will be what we build off of this coming year. So one of the themes you'll see as we talk about progress made in these goals is that where we left off, we don't drop off. We pick up and continue with the evolution of this, which you'll see in our next presentation.
President Kaler, Dr. Foley. I just want to thank you for all the work that you guys did. It was daily things were changing. We remember sitting in this boardroom and things would change the next day. As soon as we decide something, things would change. So I think that this one, when we originally said it, we thought it was going to be one thing, and it became this massive, the iceberg analysis is probably very true on this one. You see the small little peak, but underneath the surface, it was huge. So this one, I just want to thank you for the guidance here, because this was a big undertaking. So, and they all are, but this one especially, keeping our kids safe, is high in our priorities. So thank you.
President Kaler, Board Member Wilson, thank you for that feedback. I think one of the caveats here is when we look at these goals, none of these goals and all of the work that was accomplished doesn't happen without an amazing team who works 24/7 round the clock. There was never ever any one of these that was done in isolation or by themselves by a sole person. This was a combination of multiple people who, without everyone's work and support, we would not have done as well as we did as an entire team. And so I think that's one of the things our team is proud of. So thank you for that.
And Dr. Foley, I did hear from other people in other districts how they were looking to us and how we had handled the situation so well and eloquently, and we handled it far exceeding what their district had done. So I just want to thank you, publicly say that other districts were looking to us, which was nice to see.
So our next goal, goal 3, obviously the heart of what we do is teaching and learning. In spite of navigation of other circumstances, teaching and learning obviously was a big priority for us. As you know, that part of the pandemic focus was a surge into the implementation of technology, devices, curriculum, resources, and this, of course, had to maintain a priority. So we identified this obviously as a core goal where we identified initiatives that we would be, or outcomes of this, including multiple things. We are really proud of, I got to go the right direction. We are real proud of the fact that we officially launched and did our virtual academy. We had universal access for all students with devices. This is huge. We sustained and improved the use of Canvas and our resources that allow us to more personalize and customize professional development as well as curriculum for students as well. This is huge. This is kind of those foundational pieces that need to be in place. We know with the addition of a previous year, one of your focuses had been to identify a professional development director that was hired, and that individual and the coaches and the work that they did not only with teachers but also administrators was huge. And customized professional development. This bullet alone doesn't do it justice, and I know that you had an opportunity this year to see in multiple updates the kind of work that was happening. The success we had started and have always been professional learning communities, but again, that this did not stop. We also realized though that it had to be reasonable and flexible when we're minimizing contact with individuals. How do we, in rising cases of surging cases of COVID, how do we continue to also focus on how we're using our data, how are we improving, and how are we using it? It didn't stop. One of the things I'm really proud of about Higley is urgent and important always continue to move forward, even when we were in the middle of crisis. It would have been very easy to just stop and say, you know what, we'll get back to this when COVID stops. It's a part of our world, and this didn't stop. Obviously, we are evolving. Are we there yet? No, there's always room for improvement, but we didn't stop striving and working hard to keep making this a priority. And obviously, one of those components is the multiple tiers of support, MTSS. What do we do when students aren't being successful? How do we use the tools we have now that we have invested in this technology to be sure our interventions are targeted, specific, and yield results for our students? We're getting ready to get state data, and that state data will allow us to continue to use this framework that we've put in place to be sure that we continue to ensure our students are achieving at the level of success that they need to. That is our goal, that is our priority, that must remain our number one focus. And there are tons of examples of how this was, how this work continued. And finally, our final goal that we identified for you for this past year was our ability to identify processes of procedures and accountability. The theme of the last 2 years has been processes, procedures, and accountability. And consistency, follow through, and ensuring that if things need to be addressed, that we do so, that we don't just do it to fix it for now, but that we put systems in place to ensure that they continue to happen beyond a particular individual who is in that position. So one of the things that we had identified for you that could include were handbooks, emergency plans, support processes, and alignment of budgets and fiscal accountability there. So this is one of the things we implemented right away. Having goals identified right up front that we begin dealing with right away as we're planning for the new year is what is so important. You saw as we came to you and shared with you what we did with our admin retreat. We had an administrator handbook that's alive and well at Canvas. We've added to it all year long. As we're building this year's admin retreat, guess where it's going? In the admin handbook, so that this becomes where we go and how we function. Our emergency site plans. Obviously, this topic is one of significance and important, and in recent days has only been more of a national conversation across. One of the things you'll know is that we'll be bringing additional conversation about what have we done, what are we doing, and what are we continuing to refine and improve when it comes to safety and security, because in addition to academics, safety and security is the most important thing we do for all of our students and our employees, for our community. So again, those have been worked on substantially, and again, a great thank you to the multiple people involved in that, especially under the leadership of Mr. Walker. Again, suicide risk management protocols and resources were established. This was a huge component that needed to be done systemically, and that's something that we're actually proud of, that we were actually training our administrators in February, something we're planning to roll out in July. Again, another sample showing of trying to not work behind, but work ahead. And again, there are lots of ways that we can show you that we have documented evidence of accountability, that we are truly living our core value, and when we identify a need, we are working to put a process in place to fix it. But we're seeing more of a symbiotic relationship in this component rather than others. You will see in our upcoming goals, we've identified priorities and focuses for us this year that build off of the work that we've done this year. Overall, again, going back to, going the right way. None of this happens without substantial effort of an entire team, and I am so blessed to be surrounded by some amazing, talented individuals who work their tail off, and I'm lucky to be part of that. And we are proud of the work that we have done, but we're also excited to show you the work that we are outlining for next year.
As if these weren't, these goals weren't very high efforts and challenging, but they were accomplished in a pandemic. So thank you again, and we'll talk more about that later on when we have another motion in a bit. But well done, Higley and your team, and Dr. Foley, under your leadership, really, really knocked all of these out of the park. So on behalf, I know, of our entire school board, well done. Very well done.
President Kaler? Yes. I just want to note that none of these goals are or were a one and done. Although returning to the classroom or returning to school in general isn't necessary, I'm hoping, for anything in the future, but we implemented just different social emotional awareness that will continue. Health and safety protocols still ongoing. That's that's going to be here to stay. How we clean the classrooms and things like that. It's made that shift. So while next year this isn't a goal and the different goals are, we'll see, but it's something that started and will continue. It was just the beginning of certain areas, but they're not done. They will now be part of an ongoing process. So I just want to make it clear that we have obviously lots of evidence that the accomplishments you guys have made, and even though the school year's over, these goals aren't just, oh, we can check mark that we were successful. They're ongoing. And I mean, you made that clear, and Mr. Walker even today, like, there's a lot ongoing that because of these goals, and I won't say only because of these goals, but because of these goals, we were able to get the process going. It's stuff we've talked about for years and years, but we've never got that ball and process going. So now that you have, it's moving along, and they'll continue and just be part of the normal ongoing improvement process. So I just want people to understand it's not just a checkbox like, yay, we were really successful in that. These are not done. So.
Thank you. I just want to encourage the community and students and even staff members to take a moment in the summertime or any time to send an email or just a thank you to the staff in this district, to thank them. A lot of the good that happens and a lot of things you see the children doing comes from the behind the scenes. And I'm not saying you have to, I'm just saying if you have a brief second, just send that email, make that phone call, and it keeps that momentum going as well. And share your stories of success. We get a lot of emails of concerns, but what's good that has happened? And send it to us, to CCS, so we can read about it too and know more about your experiences through the hard work and efforts of all the staff here. Okay.
All right, thank you. Now we're going to move on. So we can just keep moving on to the next, which is our 9.3 focus areas for the 2022 and 2023 school year. So off and running again.
Off and running again. Perfect. So this is a continuation in our first chance to publicly present to you and to the community a conversation that we began back at our retreat in April, where we historically identify goals for the coming year, which is an important component. And one of the things that I came to you at that retreat was said, listen, we went into a deep dive of all the work that we had done with the strategic plan. As you saw in those goals, the strategic plan consumed an awful lot of our time as we focused on what do we need to do and how do we need to do it and how are we going to get there. And one of the proposals we brought to you is we wanted to bring our initiatives for you from this year to be directly connected with our priority focus areas in our implementation of our strategic plan. Going back to our core value of accountability, this is the one way that these things connect and overlap again. So in a very similar fashion, obviously we took our strategic plan and we identified a priority for us in every one of these areas, from each of the anchors to also our portrait of a graduate. So one of the things that I had come to you with was saying is we've got focus areas in each one of these, and wanted you to understand this idea, and you said come back to us with examples of implementation like we did before so that we can walk through this. So myself, and of course, as you know, we don't do anything in isolation. We do this together and in multiple meetings over multiple settings. We brought in various individuals from our team to begin to highlight out what is the work we're wanting to do. I want to compliment our team for a minute. By no means at any point is anyone looking for the easy way out. We are presenting to you probably one of the most progressive, aggressive plans of what we want to accomplish this coming year as we working toward achieving our strategic plan, not only just to check a box, but to put it into practice at an exceptional rate. So one of the things that we did was our first thing when we look at our portrait of a graduate, I'm going to go back here, our portrait of a graduate also, our strategic plan, number one, our strategic anchor one, we talk about teaching and learning, talks about how we are going to maximize academic, social, and emotional growth of each student as aligned to the portrait of a graduate. As you know, our work that we're proud of in our strategic plan now has a portrait of a graduate that defines a who, a what, and a how. So one of the first things that we wanted to do, we said, one of our focus areas we want you to know is that we're going to work on defining our portrait of a graduate so that we identify what pre-K-12 opportunities do students have that build responsible citizen, college and career-ready scholar, and innovative learner. So here we're coming back to you with what we have identified as work that we know needs to be done in order for us. What are the examples of progress that we will do systemically to align to our focus area of a portrait of a graduate that's aligned to 1.1, where we're going to identify upgrading our pre-K through 12th grade instructional maps to ensure alignment to our Arizona State standards and our resources. This is essential work that needs to happen. Some of the work that we have done is outdated. Some of the work that has been done virtually, remotely, not all on the same thing. We've added additional resources. We just did a massive science adoption. It is now time to update all of those. We also did a massive realignment of all of our resources that we're using instructionally. This is how we're going to work with our teachers across all of our areas to update our maps. This is huge. I will tell you, if all we did alone was that, this is a massive undertaking that's going to require hundreds and thousands of combined hours of individuals as we do this, but this is essential and this is important and that this is work we're going to need to accomplish. We're also going to identify specific ways when we're doing this, when we begin to look at how are we ensuring all of our students, regardless of their program, have access to experiences that we've identified in the portrait of a graduate. We're going to start by focusing on identifying specific ways that students in HUSD at all grade levels have developmentally appropriate opportunities to engage in the community. What are the themes, experiences, and opportunities all students have, regardless of their school or program, that will allow us to be sure our students have these experiences. Going back to conversations of consistency, not identical, but consistent types of experiences that ensure students have access to these. That's huge. We have an amazing community. We have a lot of resources here. In some cases, perhaps an untapped opportunity. This has been discussed multiple times before. As we emerge out of COVID normal, but navigating that world, this is something we want to finalize and identify. We also, one of the focuses we're going to have on professional development this year, when we talk about going back to innovative learner, you'll notice that parts and pieces of this college and career-ready scholar working on the alignment across the board. Responsible citizen, the community connection. And when we talk about innovative learner, that's the how. What we're focusing on this year, one of our themes for our professional development, while we will customize as needed, is engagement. How we're utilizing our tools, how we're engaging students to ensure that we are making learning more relevant and meaningful and engaging. That is going to be a focus. So what you'll begin to see are examples of the types of professional development that we will be focusing on with our across the board on how do we engage. So that is our examples of progress for this for focus on 1.1. Now I'm going to go into each of the other 4 anchors, unless you've got any questions on this one. This is how we're going to help connect to that portrait of a graduate and its alignment to 1.1, because you see that the 2 are connected. So then the next thing we came to you is said we want to focus on 1.2 by building the district's support for systemic resources for social, emotional, and positive student behaviors. This is huge. This is something we've talked about. We've also just now are finalizing the hiring of additional individuals who are being hired for this support. So here is when we brought the people in the room to say, what can we reasonably do? Knowing in mind that we're shooting for the moon, but we're going to land among the stars. What are the stars that we can be sure we can accomplish this year as we move this momentum, as we move this needle? We have identified that we are going to develop, and you're going to learn a little bit more about this in the coming informational sessions. These take time to put together. But we are developing a Healthy Higley Wellness Initiative where that identifies partnerships and agencies and community resources that we have to help support and to customize as needed. We've identified themes that we're going to begin to put parent information. You kind of got a sampling of this toward the end of the year. But what we're looking to do is actually build a more comprehensive component, not just an awareness component, but also what will students at what grade levels have access to, and what instructional or online resources will we have vetted as part of the conversations that happen around this. One of the things we know is that there are a lot of things out there, but then there's a lot of controversy around the things that are out there. What we know is that we can do this, and we can do this well if we do this ourselves, and we do it in the same way that we do all other curriculum reviews. We're going to we've identified some themes. We've identified topics around resiliency, which we're going to talk about in just a minute, suicide awareness, and drug prevention. Those are going to be kind of the community additional resources and things that we build on our website, that we provide parent information for, that we have triage support, so that we can begin to be a conduit of supportive resources as needed for anybody in our community. For this year, we're going to begin focusing on resiliency, which includes a proactive and preventative ways to overcome obstacles in developing positive life skills. This is one of those foundational pieces that we can do pre-K-12 that talks about self-esteem, healthy behaviors, ways that we set up proactive for success. This is one of the first things that we're going to start, where we build the, as you know, it's one of our 3 themes. Resiliency will be the one that we do a teacher component, a student component, and a parent component, while we maintain developing the other components. This will be something we add to. This will be our priority for this. But as you can see, that we're not putting this on as we're going to check a box here. What we're doing is showing you our development toward reaching this goal in its full capacity. A lot of work needs to be done here, but it's exciting. I will tell you, just having Dina started with us, I remember it was because it was my birthday, March 28th. She started with us March 28th, and she came in, and she and James had a meeting and coming with ideas, resources, support, someone who's full-time dedicated to this to build the infrastructure behind. It just matters. This is something, having people dedicated to this will help us do a better job of helping support our sites, our students, and our families. So this is something we're excited about.
Dr. Foley, I'm excited to see this page, because I think healthy can mean a lot of different things, and I'm glad you said that. Different community members think a healthy is a different thing, but the resilience, the suicide awareness, and the drug prevention is awesome to see. It's awesome to see. I know we were working pre-COVID on some of these, but now that we're kind of through that little trench of craziness, it's good to see that we're bringing these back. And I was able to attend the drug prevention at the end of the year, at the end of the school year. I don't even know when it was. It's kind of a whirlwind. And a lot of parents did want more resources, more. So it's exciting to see that this is one of our strategic situations. Thank you.
Any other questions about our proposal for Anchor 1.2? So again, this is a nice focus on the kind of work you're going to see. Not that the other parts on our strategic plan aren't important and that we're working on them. We find this to be a foundational piece, and when we get this part done, remember this is a 5-year plan, but if we do this part and we do this well, and then we build on it, it will only allow us to really truly take it from where we are to what we're all envisioning where we need to be.
President Kaler? Yes, go ahead. Dr. Foley, just something that came to mind as you were going through this, is maybe seeing about getting some sponsorships from local businesses for the parent meetings that can help us maybe do some additional advertising, use their own avenues for advertising. We have done several different parent forums. Pre-COVID, we did the It Only Takes One pill and everything. And currently, they're not very well attended from a parent or community standpoint, which is, I know, sometimes discouraging to staff, because they put a lot of time and effort in getting these speakers and preparing the rooms and whatever they need to do, it takes time out of their normal workday to set these up. And so sometimes it can be frustrating when you have 2 and 3 people that show up for what we feel is a huge, important topic. Unfortunately, when something happens, then we do have a large voice outcry on we need to do more. But we do have these, and so maybe something to look at local businesses, one, to offset some cost, maybe to supply some additional cost for additional advertising, and again, to use their advertising methods, however they may advertise. If they're sponsoring it, I don't know, bring some cookies or whatever, but maybe that can help drive some additional attendance, because I know the more we do, hopefully the more will start to come and attend, and the more consistent we are, instead of in 1 year we only had 1, and in 2 years we had like 4 parent meetings, but then we didn't have any, and I'm speaking even pre-COVID. So maybe as we create this program, we may look for some of that, not just the partnerships that can help with the topic, but just some financial support for trying to drive more attendance.
Great idea. Thank you. That's a great idea. You're right. It was interesting in our last forum. We didn't have a large attendance, but it was an interesting, diverse attendance. We had some individuals who were coming from a neighboring district to see how did that go. Well, you wanted to preview it with us. We had parents from charter schools who were in the room. We had some students, and we did have a few of our own parents. But you're right, our ability to bring more in, and again, we are open, we want these to be community events, whether you attend our schools or not, please come. But we're also looking at how can we increase the attendance, but also have those resources available beyond the meeting that are easily accessible, because you're right, sometimes when you need it, and you need it at your fingertips. And I think we're working to build our own internal resources that we are comfortable with, that we've vetted from agencies to websites that we can then begin to offer for families. That'll be important, that we heard from what we've heard from our community that they would like.
President Kaler, to follow up on what Mrs. Reese said, we've had business partner lunch breakfast in the past, and we had some hospitals be able to come in and talk to us, and maybe they would be a great partnership for something like this, where they would be able to advertise differently than we can even, but that might just be an avenue to also venture down, just to back up what Mrs. Reese had said. I think a hospital might be a really good place. And doctor's offices, dentists, I mean, there are many, many, many options there.
So our next one that we've identified, great suggestions. Our next one that we identified was for Strategic Anchor 2. We talked about the importance of culture matters. We want people to feel valued. We want to focus on our Strategic Anchor 2.3 by supporting our employees through meaningful feedback and interactions to build a culture where employees feel valued. We have identified that some of the examples of progress, and again, by no means is this in all that we will do, but we said here are some indicators of the kinds of things we are going to work toward. We're going to be implementing the Danielson Teacher Evaluation Instrument. As you heard several months ago, you approved this instrument. This is a substantial shift for us to have a more comprehensive instructional tool to guide feedback and conversations with teachers. To do this, it's a substantial amount of training. As you heard, we had administrators, and you read, we started with having administrators come in at the end of May, because literally 2 of our days in July at our admin retreat is going to be dedicated to the training of how to use this instrument. And you go, that's a lot of time. But when we are using a new tool with inter-rater reliability and being able to make this meaningful, We're going to invest a lot of time in that. We're then going to turn around and work to provide teachers the kind of training that they need. Now, they don't need a 2-day full training on how to understand and use the instrument. We need it to be a meaningful component for them. There's a difference between using this instrument and having this be the feedback tool you have. But in all cases, we're going to do this in a very meaningful, thoughtful approach, so that it's also not a one and done. Frequency over duration is always a much better received, and it's also when you need to know. When do you need to know and how do you need to know that? We're working on making that as meaningful as possible. We're going to also ensure that employees' questions and concerns are addressed in a timely manner and capture voices whenever it's possible to do so. It's not always possible to do so. Sometimes we have to communicate things that in some cases we didn't have a choice in the outcome. It was directive, informed, told, but changing and sharing that communication. One of the things we received positive feedback from our employees this year, that one of the things we implemented, as you know, is after every board meeting, there's an employee summary where it says, here's what we did, here's what we talked about, here's what we're working on, here's how you can access more information. That was well received. People actually appreciated that. And so wherever we can communicate, answer questions, and make sure that people know that we're wanting to hear. Now, not always can we give you exactly what you want, but we're always receptive to hearing and trying to understand. And then even when the answer is no, trying to help you understand why. That's one of our goals and priorities. The other thing we're talking about is make decisions when possible that will contribute to employee satisfaction. For example, employee benefits, our salary compensation, and acknowledgements and recognitions. We're going to continue to work on this. Again, not always possible, but where we can, this is one of the things we're going to really work to strive, and that's one of our filters. How do we make this right? With what can we afford to do, and then how do we make this right? What will be well received? I think one of the things that overall, we are really proud of our employees. We are really proud of how Higley has done what they have done, and we know that we would not have been able to accomplish all that we accomplished this without everyone throughout the organization giving all that they did this year, and making sure people know that is something we're going to continue to work at. So those are some examples of how we're going to focus on that culture and feedback, and being valued. Strategic anchor number 3, one of the things that we've talked an awful lot about is developing a marketing plan to help us enhance our relationships in the community. This is a big one for us, and this is going to take an awful lot of time, and this is one that's going to consume a lot of time that we're going to work on. And obviously, as we know, all big things are a process. And sometimes it's one step forward, 2 steps back as we get it just right. Know that this is one of the areas that we're going to strive to get just right, and it may take us quite a bit of time to do it, but this is what we're going to focus on. We are creating a comprehensive marketing plan that will guide our district for future communications to better showcase our accomplishments and achievements. We're looking at a redesign of our website and our company that we're utilizing to do this so that we can make this more of a go-to, more user-friendly. And I mean, we've had some challenges in communication when one system is down that relies on another system to pull information to communicate. You can end up with a lot of interesting challenges. So this is one of the components to put a systemic piece behind the scenes. We're going to be relaunching this business partner events, business partner breakfast. We're going to work closely with, Sarah Watts, with our town council, with our when we were back in COVID, we were doing good government events virtually. When we started even beginning the conversations of strategic plan, we were on a Zoom call with business partners. We are now evolving out of that and going to go back into reestablishing these business partner kind of relationships and opportunities. And this is something that we're excited about implementing this year. We're also working on again, this is something we've worked on, but we're continuing to work on, is the establishment of those various circumstances to guide when, where, who, how do we communicate with. As you know, that in an ever-evolving world with social media, with unique circumstances, the best ways to communicate for safety as far as need to know, when to know, how to know, and when you don't have students in our district, what do you need to know? This is something that we're working on so that we have kind of like a matrix, if you will, of our communication matrix. So these are the things we've identified. This is huge. This is a big one.
Yes, Dr. Foley, a massive undertaking that you have put yourself to take on. May I just suggest that when we reach out to our district business partner and events, that we include Chris Clark from the Queen Creek Chamber of Commerce as well. We have 2 schools in Queen Creek, and we have a huge, Queen Creek Marketplace is right next door, and there's a lot of businesses that just love to support our public schools. And I know Chris Clark has his own children in Higley, or had, I think they've graduated, but just keeping them in the loop as well would be, I think, really important. Thank you.
Yes, and with all the new businesses that are literally becoming in our backyard really close, we're going to have a whole lot of very close new partners and relationships to build and form. So that's kind of exciting too.
Dr. Foley, do you have a timeline on when we would have the business partner breakfasts back? Do you have a thought on it at all?
We've been working on an outline of a few things, but we're looking more like a fall and a spring thing. We have some additional dates with some other opportunities to highlight other events and things that they would be involved and included. But we will
Fantastic.
provide additional information
Yeah.
on as we kind of work through that with, again, multiple individuals.
Yeah, I'm excited to see this back because it was missed this year, and I understand why it was missed. I just missed it.
I have a quick question about the business partner breakfast. Can you briefly tell me, what do you do at the business partner breakfasts? And are students ever included?
Yes. President Kaler, Board Vice President Anderson, historically, business partner breakfasts were scheduled on the calendar that allowed multiple businesses to come learn more about Higley, and we established an agenda, and it did sometimes have, prior to COVID, I can remember in 2019, we actually had like a student panel that was talking about the opportunities that they have, the wakeboard, surf, things that were happening at Higley High. So our students were, one of the things we would want to do is make sure that our students were a big part of that. I mean, think about the lovely connections with our strategic plan. This is one of the ways our student leaders can be part of connecting with our business leaders in our community, a beautiful thing. So these agendas we control. Usually there was a little bit of academic, there was a little bit of upcoming events, some student highlight and focus. I can imagine there will be factual information about potential bond events coming up. That kind of thing has historically been what those look like. Obviously, depending upon the size, the scope, and scale, we're going to be taking a look at venue, because the larger they get, the faster we outgrow this space, particularly when we involve food or those kind of things. But there's all kinds of different opportunities that we are looking and talking about and exploring, and I know that Sarah Watts even has some ideas herself, and so that's one of the things we're kind of working through.
And it allowed the site administrators to be able to do networking with businesses who were like, hey, tell me what you need, I want to be involved, and things like that. So it also, in one room, gave a lot of networking and connections.
So as we, oh, sorry, if I interrupted. No. Oh, so sometimes we receive emails from businesses or people that own businesses in our community, and this would be a great opportunity to say, hey,
Yes.
who would I send them to you or?
You can
or who?
you can send them to me, you can send them to Darlene. I get their names and make sure that they're on the list. Oftentimes we work with the Gilbert Chamber of Commerce, we could work with Queen Creek, because they have businesses associated with them who automatically get those invitations. But for those who may not even be part of that yet, we can invite them. I mean, it's our party, if you will. We can invite them to our party and network. So it's an opportunity for us to know who else is out in the community and what they might have to offer.
Dr. Foley, maybe we should reach out to our PTOs and ask if they have anybody that's been super supportive, because as a PTO president, I had a couple people I remember sending up as well, and I don't know that our PTOs know that, we involve our businesses this way too, and it's a good way for those businesses to network with other schools within our district. So maybe contact the PTOs and ask if there was outstanding partnerships that they may have that they want to share.
And I think, Dr. Foley, too, we have our ASU connections as well. So Mr. Schmidt comes over, and so we have that ASU poly-campus connection, and they usually attend or send somebody from ASU over. So it's a really great event, and we have missed it. So glad to bring it back.
What's interesting is we've had an opportunity to network with these individuals at other things under COVID protocols, but to host it ourselves and come back in to our own party, if you will, is kind of what we're looking at relaunching with a real heavy focus on helping people understand what our strategic plan is, what we're working on, what our priorities are, and how they can help. And just be aware of the great thing. Another way for us to help share the wonderful things that are happening in Higley, because, you know, word of mouth and reputation is one of those things that is, this is an opportunity to help connect.
And getting those realtors involved as well is a good way to keep our community growing.
True. So then strategic anchor 4. Notice this one rhymes an awful lot with one of our focuses that we had in our goals for this year. So going back to when you were not one and done, this actually is pulled right out of our strategic plan. This is an area we found is a real focus for us systemically, and noting that one component fits nicely with another, and the stronger we get, things become more automatic. And this is a big piece of who we are and how we are. So again, when we talk about focusing on, here's examples. We're going to continue our formal review of our policy through our district process. You heard a little bit today, even our code of conduct component is deeply a part of a triggering piece for our policies. You will notice that it's connected a lot with bullet 3, with the creation of a comprehensive student handbook that encompasses the code of conduct, applicable policies, procedures, and discipline expectations. One of the things we noticed is that student discipline our own data, how we're documenting it, how we're reporting it, how we're responding, is an opportunity for us to get better. Not that we're doing wrong, but we can get better. We also are going to continue to provide intentional professional development and resources to administrators and employees through successful implementation of policies and procedures. Just changing it and informing them of that change is not enough. One of the things that you will find is that we establish annual calendars of when we have our meetings. We've also began to establish the list of, all of us know that you can have a massive meeting for administrators and put 1,000 things on the agenda, and you can say you covered it, and you did formally, but it won't change what you do and how you do it. And one of the things that we know is that this is frequency over duration, ongoing. So one of the things that we've established, similar to what you see when you have upcoming board agendas, there are some things that are annual things that always happen every time of the year. But we also now begin to have our other plugs that are standing in where we're going to work with our administrators so that timely need to know as we're reformed. One of the things we find is it's better to get their input and make them aware of what's coming and what's going before we make all these changes and then make them and go, oh wait, I wish we would have known and should have thought about. So this isn't going to be embedded as part of our ongoing training. So when we have our calendars, we also have our timely topics and working agenda where we're putting these things in, which is another strong component of processes and procedures documented and ensuring implementation. Not just a one and done, and it's in the handbook, but rather part of our ongoing training and response. So again, this is systemic ways that we ensure that we are becoming more consistent. Yes, there is autonomy. Yes, one size does not fit all, but we are part of a system, and policies and procedures and help us to be stronger as long as our system in getting those to individuals is established and set. And this is one of the things that we've outlined in our strategic plan. So as you can see, a lot of work went in, very thoughtful with the words around this, where we identify those examples of what we're going to do and how we're going to do that this year. I have a team of overachievers, and we work hard, and you can see we've got a lot outlined for us this year. But these are what we are proposing to you from our strategic plan as our focus areas for the next school year. And why we wanted to bring them to you now is these are big, and a lot of the work that needs to be confirmed needs to get going and in place as we prepare the next school year, because as you know, you've heard me say, if you're not 6 months ahead, you're already a year behind. And we want to get going and get on top of this. And a lot of the work we're doing this summer in preparation for next year is in alignment to the strategic plan. We took our time putting these together for the strategic plan, an entire year process, so that we could bring this to you. But we're moving really well. We're kind of proud of this.
Dr. Foley, we can appreciate very much that you brought this to us already in June, knowing that it was going to be a big task for you and your team, but I can understand the importance of it being done so that we can start moving in July already towards these hefty goals. So, well done. Any other questions or concerns for Dr. Foley? Mrs.
President
Reese?
Kaler, I just want to mention, just so people understand,
these goals that you just brought to us, the board initiatives, is what we hold you accountable to. So everything you just laid out as board members and what your performance evaluation is are on these goals. And these are huge. There's a lot of work to be done. So it's stuff that you're willing to tackle and take on and have prioritized. But this is what we base our superintendent's performance evaluation on. So I just want people to understand that as they go through and read this, watch it, look at it, there's a lot of work to be done. And you're up to the task, you and your team, and you're prepared and you're ready to go. Even down to the examples that we should expect to see throughout the year, not just at the end of the year as we're about to talk about this past year, but we see the work and all the progress throughout the year. So I just want people to understand these aren't just, we're gonna talk about them and they sound good, which I get, but this is what your performance is held to. So I just wanted to clarify that because you have a lot of work.
Yes, I do. We do, and I do. And as you shared, this is one of the focuses you had as a board from an October retreat, was to update and refine the superintendent's evaluation, which now includes an entire component on the completion of these goals, which is something you will vote to approve. So I bring them to you as a proposal. This is our first meeting discussing the examples. What we will do, we've heard your feedback and better understand kind of what you're thinking and looking as far as implementation. We will bring these back to the next board meeting on the 22nd for you to officially adopt them. We are already started work on them. They're directly connected to our strategic plan, but then my evaluation for the following year will be reflected to have these as indicators of accomplishment. And of course, no superintendent does it alone, but I will ensure that this work gets done with myself and this amazing support team that I have.
Well said. Anything else? All right, moving on to 10.1. It is my absolute pleasure to announce that Dr. Foley's evaluation from our goals and initiatives from last year, she was deemed highly effective. So with matching this amazing accomplishment, and it was done, like I said, not just in a regular school year, but during a pandemic as well. It is my pleasure to move that we approve the top percent allowed per Dr. Foley's contract, which is 6% for her pay for performance.
Second.
Questions, concerns, comments? Mrs. Schultz, did you want to say something?
No, I was just
Okay.
hearing.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 5-0. Well done, Dr. Foley. We are blessed to have you. And moving on to 11.1, any future agenda items, you can see we still have a lot coming up.
President Kaler.
Yes.
I just wanted to mention, I've been in quite a few schools recently, and I know we've talked about it, but publicly we want to mention how bad our carpets are getting. I know that everyone keeps saying that our schools are just fine, but I just want everyone to be aware that how big the runs are and how they're going about that. So maybe look around your schools, because I know that that's been a hot topic, that our schools are just fine, but the carpets are getting a little worn. So thank you.
Mrs. Anderson.
Can you please remind me the last time the employee code of conduct was reviewed? I'm sorry I didn't ask this sooner, but has it been recent? I cannot remember.
And there's a policy and a policy.
Is that what it goes by?
Say good afternoon, President Kalar, Vice President Anderson, members of the board. There's no formal employee conduct separate of the policies that are listed in G. So as we continue to work on policies, we'll continue to address that. But there's a staff conduct, which is policy GBEB, and then there's some exhibits that go with it.
Okay, and that's included, how So is that included in contracts where employees are made aware of their expectations and?
So every year, we send out an email and communication that happens at the various first of the year kickoff that just directs individuals to the policies to let them know that all employee policies are listed in the G section.
Okay.
So, and then if there's any changes, misreach and/or if anything happens here, it's communicated out to them separately too.
Okay, and if you say this, I apologize. When was the last time that policy in the
So it was pre-COVID, where there was a review of the G policies, but I do know that there's some additional components that we need to revisit, so we'll be revisiting that throughout this next year.
Okay, that was going to lead to my future question.
Vice President Anderson, one of the things is that if they are updated statutory or legislatively, those usually come to us through ASBA. If we were to make sweeping changes to them, obviously we would bring them to you for approval. But when people are hired, they're obviously referred to their expectations and those kind of things. But those are the policies that govern us as far as employee conduct and behaviors.
And just to follow up on that, all of our policies are public record. Anyone from the public can review any of our policies at any time. It's within the governing board section of our website. In board docs, they can go in and they can read any and every policy and see the regulation that goes with it. So our policies are very much so public record. So if anyone has ever wondered what our policies are, they can access that through board docs on our website. So.
Okay, thank you. And the reason I was asking about that is, we have these reviews and trainings and involvement for students and their expectations of behaviors, and then we say staff just go read it, and follow the rules. So I just didn't, first I was making sure it's updated or current, and then if there are any helpful ways that staff should know how to behave and should have good expectations, but should we also say, here's everything, now go find the way to behave, just like we hold our students and give them a way to learn and give them a chance to learn what was expected. Maybe we should do the same for our staff as well, and just a good reminder.
Yeah, Vice President Anderson, so we do our annual trainings every year, and that happens in the beginning of the new academic year, and those highlight the most significant areas like sexual harassment, if facilities, there's some lockout, tagout, so certain specifics of that. Those are, as Dr. Foley mentioned, kind of more compliance components too, not all of it, but some of it, where some of those other areas, I struggle in the sense that it would be hard because there's just so much that you really could address. It would be so continuous, and unfortunately, we're not appropriately staffed that way to do that, but it could be in the future that we have some more ability with the onboarding of the new assistant director to where we could focus more on training if we've got somebody else to support the day-to-day operations of the department. So.
I wanted to also add, in board docs, there's a searchable feature that makes it pretty easy. If you want to find a specific policy, you can search pretty easily the word, the words that you might think are in it, and it pretty much does pretty well on pulling up this specific document you're looking for. So just for the community as a whole, there is a searchable feature.
All right, I move that we adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Did I hear Mrs. Schultz?
Can you hear me?
Motion carries 4-0. 4-0. I move that now we are going to, getting there. I move that the governing board convene an executive session for discussion or consultation for the legal advice with the governing board's attorney pursuant to ARS 38-431.03A3.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 5-0. And we will be adjourning from that in executive session. So thank you and have a good afternoon.